Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My heart pounded with anticipation as I spent 3 hours preparing that Mother's Day lunch. 3 full hours with my hands working tirelessly, chopping vegetables until my fingers ached, carefully marinating the roast to perfection, and lovingly baking a lemon cake from scratch, the tangy scent filling my kitchen. I didn't do this to impress anyone, but because deep in my soul I believed it mattered. I truly believed family mattered. The dining room looked absolutely beautiful, like something from a magazine. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden rays that danced on the crystal glasses I'd inherited from my mother. Fresh tulips brightened the center of the table, their yellow petals practically glowing. I specifically chose yellow because they were Joan's favorite, though my chest tightened knowing she'd never once thanked me for remembering such personal details about her. "Mom, this looks great," Will said as they arrived, the brief kiss on my cheek feeling rushed and obligatory before he quickly took his usual seat beside Joan. My daughter-in-law didn't even bother with a greeting. The knot in my stomach tightened as she just scanned the room with those critical eyes of hers and set her designer purse on my antique sideboard with a heavy thud that made me wince. "It's warm in here, isn't it? Do you ever use the air conditioning?" Her words stung like tiny needles. I swallowed my first response, feeling my face flush with embarrassment and frustration. At 63, I'd learned through years of disappointment which battles were worth fighting and which would only lead to more heartache. "I'll adjust it after we eat," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle on my lips. "The food's ready and I don't want it getting cold." The tension was already building in my chest, like a storm front rolling in, making it harder to breathe normally. For 5 painful years, I'd been helping them financially, paying their rent when my own house needed repairs, covering their car payments when I delayed buying a new car for myself, even funding most of their vacations while I stayed home. 5 long years of watching Joan spend my hard-earned money while treating me like an annoying interruption to her perfect life. My heart ached remembering how Will had been different before her, my sweet boy who called every Sunday just to hear my voice, who genuinely cared about more than just what I could give him. Now he sat silently as Joan dominated every conversation, every decision, my son fading before my eyes. Lunch started pleasantly enough, though my stomach was too knotted to enjoy the food I'd spent hours preparing. We discussed the neighborhood, the weather, nothing consequential. Then Will mentioned they were thinking of moving to a bigger apartment, and I felt that familiar anxiety creeping up my spine. "That's a big step," I said carefully, measuring my words so they wouldn't sound judgmental. "Those downtown units are expensive." My fingers nervously tapped against my water glass. Joan's eyes flashed with that look I'd come to dread. "We found the perfect place," she announced, her voice ringing with excitement that made my stomach sink. 3 bedrooms, that little office space Will needs, and the location is just divine. She emphasized the word divine in that way that always made me feel small and provincial. "Sounds lovely," I said, cutting into my roast, the knife trembling slightly in my hand. "But can you afford it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The room suddenly went cold despite the warmth Joan had complained about earlier. I could feel the chill emanating from her. "We're managing just fine," Joan said, voice sharpening like a newly honed knife. "Not all of us had the luxury of a full career before retirement." Her words dripped with disdain. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone, replaced by a burning in my chest. "That wasn't a luxury, Joan. I worked 60-hour weeks after Robert died, coming home exhausted with barely enough energy to help Will with homework, just to put him through college. I earned every penny of my retirement." My voice quavered with emotion I couldn't hide. "And now you lord it over us," she said with a dismissive wave that made me feel 2 inches tall. "Every time we need a little help, we have to endure the lectures, the passive-aggressive comments. It makes me sick." "That's not fair," I said quietly, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. The one that came whenever I realized how they saw me. The pain was physical, like someone squeezing my heart. Not as family, but as an ATM with inconvenient opinions, a reality that cut deeper than any knife. "Isn't it?" Joan laughed. That brittle sound that never held any real humor, just contempt. "Will, tell your mother how you feel when she starts questioning our finances." Her command made me flinch. Will shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. And my heart sank watching him choose sides yet again. "Mom, we just need a little help with the deposit, that's all." His voice held that wheedling tone I'd come to recognize and dread. "After everything else?" I asked, unable to hold back anymore, the dam of my patience finally breaking. The rent I've been paying for years while I put off fixing my own roof, the car payments that meant I couldn't travel, Joan's shopping trips that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oh my God," Joan interrupted, throwing her napkin onto the table with dramatic flair. "This is exactly what I meant. You're not helping us. You're controlling us." She practically spat the words. "I've never controlled you," I said, my voice wavering as tears threatened. "I just want you both to be more responsible with money. Maybe if Joan got a job." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "A job?" Joan's face flushed crimson with rage. "I've been trying to launch my interior design business for years. But no, that's not good enough for the mighty Beth." "Is it?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm that felt like acid on my skin. I bit my lip, knowing I'd never seen a single client enter their home. Never heard about a single project completed. Just expensive courses and equipment that went nowhere while my savings account dwindled. "I think we should discuss this another time," I said, attempting to salvage what was left of our Mother's Day lunch, though my hands trembled as I reached for my water glass. "No, let's discuss it now," Joan snapped, her eyes flashing dangerously. "Let's discuss how you hold your financial support over our heads like a weapon. How you can't stand that Will chose me instead of staying your obedient little boy forever." Each word felt like a slap across my face. "Joan," Will warned, finally speaking up, though too late to stop the avalanche. "No, I'm done pretending," Joan continued, standing up now, her chair scraping harshly against my hardwood floor. "Everyone tiptoes around her because she has the money. But I'm sick of it. You're nothing but a controlling old shrew who can't let go." The venom in her voice made me physically recoil. The room fell silent. Will stared at his plate, his cowardice breaking my heart into tiny pieces. No defense of his mother. No objection to his wife's cruelty. Just silence that screamed louder than any words could. "I think you both should leave," I said, my voice unnaturally calm despite the earthquake happening inside me, my entire body trembling with the effort to maintain composure. Joan grabbed her purse with a triumphant smirk that burned itself into my memory. Will followed her like a shadow, pausing only briefly at the door, his face a mask of discomfort rather than real regret. "Mom, she didn't mean yes, she did," I said, feeling utterly hollow. "And you let her?" "That's what hurts the most." My voice broke on the last word. I closed the door behind them and returned to my beautiful table, set with such care for people who saw me only for what I could give them. The yellow tulips seemed to mock me now, their cheerful colour a stark contrast to the grey emptiness spreading through my chest. That night, alone in my too-quiet house, I made a decision that sent waves of both terror and relief through my body. If they saw me as nothing but a bank account, then perhaps it was time to close that account for good. I was done being taken advantage of, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Done being the family shrew. Done letting my own son and his wife drain not just my savings, but my dignity drop by painful drop. Tomorrow everything would change. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept hearing Joan's voice echoing in my head. That word shrew, hanging in the air like poison, burning my skin and seeping into my blood. But worse than that was Will's silence. The memory of his downcast eyes stabbing my heart repeatedly. My son, who I'd raised alone after his father died when he was just 12, whose tears I'd wiped away countless nights, hadn't defended me. Not a single word. Morning came with the harsh clarity that only a sleepless night can bring. I made coffee with trembling hands and sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet home I'd worked so hard to pay off, my sanctuary now feeling like a museum of forgotten sacrifices. The same home where I'd bandaged Will's scraped knees, my fingers gentle as he cried, where I'd helped with science projects late into the night, and where we'd jumped up and down together, screaming with joy when his college acceptance letter arrived. The first call came at 9:17 a.m. Will. I stared at the screen, my heart racing before letting it go to voicemail, my finger hovering but not pressing accept. "Mom, about yesterday." Joan was just stressed. You know how she gets. "Call me back, okay?" His voice sounded far away, detached from the pain he'd caused. No apology, no acknowledgement of how deeply I'd been hurt. Just excuses for his wife's behavior. As always, the familiar disappointment tasted bitter in my mouth. I opened my laptop instead and logged into my banking portal, my hands still shaking slightly. The numbers stared back at me, stark evidence of years of financial sacrifice, each transaction a memory of something I'd given up. I'd been transferring $3,000 into their joint account every month since they got married 5 years ago. The weight of those numbers making it hard to breathe. A temporary arrangement that had somehow become permanent while my own dreams gathered dust. When Robert died, I'd been 42 with a 14-year-old son and a mortgage that felt like a mountain. I took on extra accounting clients, worked weekends until my eyes burned, skipped vacations while friends sent postcards from beaches, all to ensure Will would have every opportunity. He never went without, even when I did, eating simple meals after serving him proper dinners. I scrolled through the transaction history, my stomach clenching as I noticed patterns I'd been willfully ignoring. The day after my deposits, large sums withdrawn at high-end stores. The receipts I'd glimpsed in their trash. Joan's business expenses that never resulted in actual business. Expensive restaurants where they dined while I ate leftovers. Weekend getaways I was never invited to join. Only seeing the photos later on social media. My phone buzzed again, making me jump. Joan this time, her name on my screen sending a wave of anxiety through my body. Beth, we need to talk about the apartment deposit. It's due Friday and we can't lose this place. It's perfect for us. Her voice held no warmth, just entitlement that made my skin crawl. No mention of yesterday's outburst. No apology for calling me a shrew at my own Mother's Day table. Just demands wrapped in expectation. I closed my eyes, remembering how different things used to be. The memories bittersweet and painful. Will calling just to check in, his voice warm with genuine concern. Bringing me soup when I had the flu. Sitting beside my bed and placing a cool cloth on my forehead. Small gifts for no reason other than he'd seen something he thought I'd like. Treasures I still kept in my bedside drawer. Then Joan came along and everything changed, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my son's life. Suddenly, my financial support wasn't generous assistance. It was expected, demanded, and somehow still not enough to earn basic respect. You're not helping us. You're controlling us, Joan had said, her words still burning. But who was really controlling whom? My chest tightened with the irony. They lived in an apartment they couldn't afford on their own. Drove cars I made payments on. Took vacations funded by my retirement savings. All while treating me like an inconvenience they had to tolerate to keep the money flowing. The third call came from Will again. This time I answered, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. His voice lacked genuine remorse. Are you? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Are you really sorry, Will? Of course I am. You know Joan. She speaks without thinking sometimes. The excuse was so familiar it made me nauseous. And what about you, Will? You didn't speak at all. The pain in my voice was unmistakable. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. We really need your help with this apartment deposit, he finally said, changing the subject, and my heart sank even further. It's $5,000, but it's an incredible deal for the location. The eagerness in his voice made me feel sick. I closed my eyes, feeling suddenly exhausted. Will, do you realize how much money I've given you both over the years? Have you ever sat down and calculated it? Mom, not this again. His exasperation cut like a knife. Over $180,000, I said, the number I'd calculated while sleepless last night, each digit a sacrifice I'd made. That's how much I've transferred to you since your wedding. Not loans, gifts. My voice cracked on the last word. We've been grateful, he said, his voice defensive, not matching his words. Have you? Because yesterday didn't feel like gratitude. It felt like contempt. The hurt poured out in my words. That was Joan being Joan. You know how she is. His dismissal made my stomach clench. Yes, I did know. And I'd allowed it for too long, the realization washing over me like ice water. I need some time, I said, feeling suddenly decisive. I can't talk about money right now. But the deposit? His voice rose with panic. I said I need time, Will. My tone left no room for argument. After hanging up, I sat in my garden, the gentle spring breeze doing little to cool my flushed cheeks. The spring flowers I'd planted coming into bloom, their faces turned toward the sun while my own face felt heavy with unshed tears. I'd planned to travel after retirement, my heart leaping at the thought of seeing the Grand Canyon at sunrise, visiting Europe's cobblestone streets, maybe taking that Alaskan cruise Robert and I had dreamed about, the brochures still in my desk drawer. Instead, my savings had been slowly draining away, funding someone else's dreams while mine withered on the vine, forgotten even by me. By evening, I'd made my decision, determination flowing through me like a new kind of strength. I logged back into my accounts, my fingers trembling but sure, and cancelled the automatic monthly transfer to their joint account. Then I transferred the bulk of my accessible savings, the money they'd come to see as theirs by right, into a certificate of deposit with a 6-month hold. Not hidden, not gone, but no longer available for last-minute emergencies that were really just wants disguised as needs, the truth of which I'd ignored for too long. My hands trembled as I confirmed the transaction, my heart racing with both fear and exhilaration. For 5 years, I'd been an enabler, watching my son become increasingly dependent, increasingly entitled, his character changing before my eyes. I told myself I was helping, the lie bitter in my mouth now. But was I just making it easier for them to avoid responsibility, to avoid growing up? The confirmation email arrived with a soft ping that somehow sounded final. It was done, and I felt dizzy with the implications. If they're going to call me a shrew, I whispered to my empty house, my voice sounding stronger than I expected. I might as well stop paying for the privilege. The words hung in the air, a declaration of independence. My phone began ringing again almost immediately, as if they could somehow sense what I'd just done, some spiritual connection to my bank account. Will, then Joan, then Will again. I silenced the ringer and went to bed, exhausted but oddly peaceful, like I'd put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. Tomorrow would bring a storm, I had no doubt, my stomach clenching at the thought. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own ship instead of being dragged along in someone else's wake. Maybe I'd book that Alaskan cruise after all, the thought bringing a genuine smile to my lips for the first time in days. The first 48 hours of silence were almost peaceful, a strange calm before the storm I knew was coming. I putted in my garden, feeling the soil between my fingers bringing me back to myself, reorganized my closet, finding clothes I'd forgotten I owned, and even called my travel agent to request some brochures for that Alaskan cruise, excitement fluttering in my chest. For 2 glorious days, I breathed without the weight of obligation pressing down on my chest, each breath feeling fuller than it had in years. Then came the storm, crashing down with predictable fury. "What the hell, Mom?" Will's voice exploded through my phone on the 3rd morning, making me flinch. No greeting, no preamble, just anger that hit me like a physical force. The rent was due yesterday and the automatic transfer didn't happen. We're going to be charged late fees. His panic was palpable, but strangely, it didn't trigger my usual need to rescue him. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee before answering, gathering my strength. "Good morning to you too, Will." My calm voice surprised even me. "Did you cancel the transfer? Is this some kind of punishment for what happened on Mother's Day?" His accusation made my face burn. "It's not a punishment," I said evenly, though my heart raced. "It's a boundary." "A what?" He sounded genuinely confused, as if the concept was entirely foreign to him. Maybe it was, I realized with a pang of regret. I'd never enforced any real boundaries with him before, always giving in to maintain peace. "I'm no longer comfortable with our current financial arrangement," I said, using the calm, professional tone I'd perfected during my 30 years as an accountant, though inside I felt anything but professional. "I've decided to make some changes." "Changes? Mom, we depend on that money. We've built our lives around it." His voice rose with panic that would normally have me reaching for my checkbook. And there it was, the stark truth I'd been avoiding for years, hitting me like a slap. My son and his wife had built their lifestyle on my retirement savings, not on their own earnings. The realization made me feel sick. "That's exactly the problem, Will," I said, my voice stronger now. "You're 34 years old. You shouldn't be depending on your mother's monthly checks to pay your rent. It's not healthy for any of us. This is about Joan, isn't it? You've never liked her." His deflection was so predictable it almost made me laugh. I closed my eyes, feeling suddenly tired. "This isn't about liking or not liking Joan. This is about the fact that I've given you both over $180,000 since your wedding. And instead of gratitude, I get called names at my own dinner table." The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. She apologized for that. His lie hung in the air between us. "No, Will, she didn't. Neither of you did." My voice broke slightly. "You both just pretended it never happened." Silence fell between us, heavy and accusatory, filled with truths neither of us wanted to face. "So that's it," he finally said. his tone sullen like the teenager he used to be. "You're cutting us off completely because of one bad day." "It wasn't one bad day," I said, suddenly understanding the depth of our problem. "It was the day I finally saw clearly what's been happening for years. How I've been enabling behavior that isn't good for any of us. We have bills due, Mom. Real bills. What are we supposed to do?" His voice held genuine panic that tugged at my heart despite everything. The question hung in the air, so obvious in its answer that I almost laughed, though there was no humor in the situation. "Get jobs. Live within your means. Be adults." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "You'll figure it out. You're both intelligent people, much more capable than you've been allowed to believe." He hung up without saying goodbye, the silence on the line feeling both painful and necessary. The second call came an hour later. Joan this time, her voice syrupy sweet in a way that instantly set off warning bells in my head, making my muscles tense. "Beth, darling, I think we got off on the wrong foot the other day. I was stressed about some design client issues and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." Her voice dripped with false contrition that made my skin crawl. No genuine apology, no real acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused. Just a transparent attempt to smooth things over and get the money flowing again. I could practically hear the calculation behind her words. "I appreciate you reaching out, Joan," I said neutrally, keeping my emotions tightly controlled. "Will mentioned there was some issue with the monthly transfer. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." Her feigned innocence made my teeth clench. "No misunderstanding. I've decided to make some changes to my financial commitments." My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. A beat of silence. Then her tone shifted, sugar turning to vinegar in an instant, revealing the truth beneath her facade. "Are you serious? You're really going to punish us over one stupid fight?" The venom in her voice confirmed I'd made the right decision. "This isn't punishment, Joan. This is me reevaluating my choices." My calm response clearly frustrated her further. "You vindictive old woman," she hissed, all pretense abandoned, her true feelings exposed like raw nerves. Will was right. You've never accepted me, never thought I was good enough for your precious son. "This isn't about you, Joan," I said, feeling strangely detached from her anger now. "It's about the way you both treat me. It's about respect. We treat you like family." Her indignation would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. "No," I said quietly, finally speaking my truth. "You treat me like an ATM, one that's expected to dispense cash without questions or conditions." She hung up with a stream of profanities that would have made a sailor blush, her true colors fully displayed. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with messages from family members I rarely heard from, their sudden interest in my life both transparent and hurtful. Will's cousins, my sister-in-law, even Robert's brother from Arizona who never calls on my birthday. All of them concerned, all of them asking variations of the same question. Why was I abandoning my son when he needed me? Their words twisted the knife of guilt already embedded in my heart. The family grapevine had been busy, and Joan was clearly the one tending the vines, spreading her version of events without my input. Ruth called as I was making dinner, the familiar ringtone bringing a smile to my face for the first time that day. My oldest friend, the only person besides Robert who had ever truly seen me, who knew all my flaws and loved me anyway. "I just got the strangest call from your sister-in-law," she said without preamble. "Something about you having a breakdown and cutting off Will." Her voice held the perfect blend of concern and skepticism. I laughed despite everything, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. "That didn't take long. The family phone tree is still efficient, I see. What's really going on?" "Beth?" Ruth's direct question was like a breath of fresh air. I told her everything, my voice sometimes breaking as I detailed the years of financial support, the Mother's Day disaster, my decision to stop enabling their dependency. It felt good to finally speak my truth, to have someone listen without judgment. "Good for you," Ruth said when I finished, her approval warming me. "It's about damn time. I've been watching that boy and his wife drain you dry for years. It's been breaking my heart. The family doesn't see it that way," I said, feeling the weight of their disapproval. "According to Joan, I'm having some kind of vengeful breakdown. Apparently I've lost my mind because I've closed my wallet. Of course that's what she's saying. She just lost her meal ticket." Ruth's bluntness made me wince, but her words rang true. "Will thinks I'm punishing him," I said quietly, the guilt still nagging despite my resolve. "That's not what this is about." "Isn't it a little bit?" Ruth asked gently. He sat there while his wife called you names. He deserves to feel some consequences for that. Perhaps she was right, the truth of her words hitting home. Perhaps part of me did want Will to understand how deeply he'd hurt me with his silence, his tacit acceptance of Joan's behavior. But it was more than that, much more. This was about reclaiming my life, my future, my dignity. This was about finally saying enough, a word I'd forgotten how to use. The next morning, I drove to the mall, something I rarely did anymore, finding it too crowded and chaotic for my taste, the noise and bustle usually overwhelming me. But I needed to see something with my own eyes, to confirm what my heart already knew. I parked near the high-end department store and waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. At precisely 10:30 a.m., Joan's red BMW pulled into the lot, the car I'd helped finance with emergency money last year. She stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and carrying the expensive purse she'd bought on sale last month. The one Will had casually mentioned cost over $800, more than my monthly grocery budget. I watched, a knot forming in my throat as she met two other women, all of them laughing carefree as they headed into the store. No sign of the financial distress Will had described. So much for being desperate about bills, the reality of their deception making me feel physically ill. As I drove home, my resolve strengthened with each mile. If they were truly in financial distress, it wasn't because I'd closed my wallet. It was because theirs had never been open in the first place. The truth hurt, but it also freed me from doubt. 2 weeks passed in a blur of missed calls, accusatory text messages, and increasingly hostile voicemails that left me feeling drained and sad. According to Will, I was destroying their lives, his guilt trips hitting their mark despite my resolve. According to Joan, I was a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see others happy, her venom still capable of making me flinch. According to various extended family members who suddenly had opinions about my relationship with my son, I was having some kind of mental breakdown, their judgment adding another layer of pain. I deleted most messages without listening to them fully, my hand trembling as I pressed delete. There was only so much vitriol I could stomach in a day before it threatened to drown me. Then came the text that made my heart sink. Fear and anger competing for dominance. Family dinner at our place tonight, 7:00 p.m. Everyone will be there. We need to talk about what's going on with you. Everyone. My stomach churned with anxiety. That meant my brother Tom and his wife Susan, whose judgment I'd always felt keenly. Probably Robert's sister Diane, who had always treated Will like her own son and me like an inadequate substitute for her brother. Maybe even Aunt Martha, who at 87 rarely left her assisted living facility but never missed an opportunity to meddle in family matters, her sharp tongue legendary at family gatherings. A family intervention with me as the target, the realization making me feel sick and angry at once. My first instinct was to refuse, indignation burning in my chest. I didn't owe them an explanation, and I certainly didn't need to subject myself to a coordinated attack designed to make me back down. But then I remembered something my mother used to say, her voice echoing in my memory. Never run from a fight you know you can win. I texted back a single word, my heart racing as I hit send fine. The drive to Will and Joan's apartment felt longer than usual, my anxiety growing with each mile. They lived in a trendy area of the city, in a building with amenities they rarely used but loved to mention in conversation. A rooftop pool I'd never seen them use, a concierge service that seemed excessive, a fitness centre with personal trainers available that Joan talked about but never visited. All funded by my monthly transfers, the thought now making me clench my teeth. I parked beside Tom's Lexus and took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly as I checked my appearance in the mirror. Then I smoothed my hair, reapplied my lipstick to hide my nervousness, and headed inside with my head held high, though my legs felt unsteady. The apartment was immaculate as always, with Joan's designer touches everywhere that always made me feel slightly uncomfortable. Throw pillows that cost more than my first car. Artwork she claimed were investments that would appreciate in value. Furniture that looked beautiful but was oddly uncomfortable, form over function in a way that seemed to symbolize our entire relationship. Will opened the door wearing an expression that mingled relief and apprehension, his familiar face now looking like a stranger's. "Mom?" he said, the word awkward between us now, laden with unspoken tension. "Thanks for coming." His gratitude felt hollow. Beyond him, I could see the others already gathered like a tribunal. Tom and Susan on the expensive sectional sofa, their faces carefully neutral. Diane perched on an accent chair. her face pinched with concern that seemed more judgmental than caring. Aunt Martha surprisingly present, her walker parked beside a dining chair that had been positioned specially for her sharp eyes missing nothing. And at the center of it all, Joan playing perfect hostess, offering wine and making small talk as if this were a normal family gathering and not an ambush. Her performance almost admirable in its calculation. "Would you like a glass of wine, Beth?" she asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We have that Cabernet you like." Her false warmth made my skin crawl. The Cabernet I'd brought them as a housewarming gift 3 years ago, probably the realization adding to my resolve. "No, thank you," I said, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "I'd like to know why I've been summoned here." My direct approach clearly surprised them. Tom cleared his throat, always the peacemaker. "Summoned is a bit dramatic, Beth. We're worried about you." His concern might have been genuine, but it was based on false information. "About me or about the money I'm no longer providing to Will and Joan?" I asked. Cutting to the heart of the matter, tired of the pretense, the room shifted uncomfortably, people avoiding eye contact. Joan's smile tightened to a thin line, her mask slipping slightly. "It's not about money," Will said. Though his eyes said otherwise, the lie so transparent it hurt. "It's about family." "Family?" I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. "Is that what we call it when a son sits in silence while his wife insults his mother? When he expects that same mother to fund his lifestyle without question? Or gratitude?" My voice shook with emotion I couldn't contain. "Beth," Diane interjected, her tone condescending in a way that instantly raised my hackles. "Will tells us you've been under a lot of stress lately. We understand retirement can be a difficult adjustment." "I've been retired for 3 years, Diane," I replied, feeling heat rise to my face. "I was adjusting just fine until I realized I was being taken advantage of by people who claim to love me." "No one's taking advantage of you," Joan said, her voice rising slightly, a crack in her perfect hostess veneer. "We've always been grateful for your help." "Grateful? Is that what you call it when you referred to me as a controlling old shrew at my Mother's Day table?" The memory still stung, making my voice crack. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Apparently Joan had left that detail out of her version of events, the shock on everyone's faces confirming my suspicion. "Joan was just upset," Will began, quick to defend her as always. "And you said nothing," I cut in, unable to hide the hurt anymore. "Nothing, Will. Your wife insulted your mother in the cruelest way possible. And you sat there in silence, staring at your plate like a coward." Tom shifted uncomfortably, clearly reassessing the situation. "Maybe we should all take a step back." "No," I said firmly, standing my ground despite my trembling hands. "I'm tired of stepping back. I've spent the last 5 years watching my retirement savings dwindle while these two live a lifestyle they can't afford. I've listened to Joan complain about my interference while cashing my checks without a second thought. I've watched my son turn into someone who values money over respect, and it's breaking my heart." "That's not fair," Will protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? Will, not to ask for money, not to complain about a bill, just to check on your mother?" My voice cracked with emotion. His silence was answer enough, the truth hanging in the air between us. "You've all been summoned here under false pretenses," I continued, looking around the room, making eye contact with each person. "There's nothing wrong with me. I simply decided to stop being an ATM and start being a parent again. A real parent doesn't enable dependence. A real parent expects basic respect." Aunt Martha, who had been unusually quiet until now, thumped her cane on the floor, the sound making everyone jump. "She's right," she said, her voice cracking with age but firm with conviction that warmed my heart. "You all called me here talking about how Beth's lost her mind, but all I'm hearing is that she finally found her backbone." Joan's face flushed crimson with anger and embarrassment. "With all due respect, Mrs. Henderson, you don't know the whole story." Her dismissal of the family matriarch was telling. "I know enough," Martha retorted, her eyes sharp despite her years. "I know Robert left Beth well provided for, and instead of enjoying her golden years, she's been bankrolling your lifestyle. I see those designer shoes, girl, and that watch Will's wearing. I may be old, but I'm not blind." "It wasn't like that," Will insisted. But his protest sounded weak even to his own ears. "Then what was it like?" I asked, finding strength in Martha's support. "Explain it to me, Will." Explain how it's normal for a grown man and his wife to depend on his mother's monthly checks to pay rent on an apartment they can't afford. Explain how it's acceptable for that wife to insult that mother after years of financial support. The room fell silent again, the truth finally emerging from behind the curtain of lies. In that silence, I saw the truth dawn on Tom's face, on Diane's, even on Susan's. They had come prepared to deal with a difficult, irrational old woman. Instead, they found themselves facing an uncomfortable reality about Will and Joan, one they couldn't easily dismiss. Maybe, Susan said slowly, her eyes avoiding Joan's glare, we should give Beth and Will some privacy to discuss this. Her suggestion clearly an attempt to salvage the situation. Joan immediately objected, panic flashing across her face. There's nothing to discuss privately. This affects both of us. Her voice rose with desperation. And there it was, the mask slipping completely, revealing the fear beneath. Joan wasn't worried about family harmony or my mental health. She was worried about losing her financial safety net, the truth so transparent it was almost sad. No, I said, standing up, feeling stronger than I had in years. We don't need privacy. What we needed was honesty, and now we have it. I won't be reinstating the monthly transfers. I won't be funding the deposit on a new, larger apartment. I won't be treated with disrespect by people who claim to love me, but only value what I can give them. My voice shook, but with conviction rather than weakness. Will's face crumpled, his composure finally breaking. For a moment I saw a flash of my little boy, the memory making my heart ache. The one who used to look at me like I hung the moon. The one who cried when he accidentally broke my favorite vase and then saved his allowance for months to replace it, presenting it to me with such pride. What had happened to that boy? The question brought tears to my eyes. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, please, we need you. His plea tugged at my heart despite everything. Not I love you, not I'm sorry, just we need you. And we both knew what kind of need he meant. The stark truth of our relationship laid bare. No, Will, I said softly, though it broke my heart. What you need is to grow up. What you need is to stop expecting others to fund your choices. What you need is to remember the values I raised you with: honesty, hard work, respect. Each word felt like both a wound and a healing. I picked up my purse and headed for the door, my legs surprisingly steady, pausing only briefly to look back at the assembled family members, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. I'm sorry you were all brought here under false pretenses. Next time, I hope it's for a real celebration, not an attempt to manipulate an old woman into opening her wallet again. I managed to keep my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Joan's voice rising in anger, and for the first time in years, I didn't worry about smoothing things over, didn't feel responsible for managing everyone else's feelings. This wasn't my mess to fix. It was time they learned to clean up after themselves, the realization both terrifying and liberating. After the disastrous intervention, I expected radio silence from Will and Joan, bracing myself for the painful void. Instead, the calls and texts stopped abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. No more accusations, no more pleas for help, no more thinly veiled threats about me never seeing future grandchildren. Just nothing, the silence somehow more deafening than the previous barrage. For 3 weeks, I basked in the quiet, though it was tinged with a sadness I couldn't shake. I booked that Alaskan cruise for September, my hands trembling with excitement as I put down the deposit for a 14-day journey through icy waters and breathtaking landscapes I'd only seen in photos. I joined a gardening club that met on Saturdays at the community centre, finding joy in connecting with people who wanted nothing from me but conversation. I even had dinner with Peter, the widower who'd moved in down the street last year. His kind eyes and genuine interest in my thoughts refreshing. Nothing romantic, just pleasant conversation with someone who understood the strange territory of life after losing a spouse, the shared experience creating an instant bond. Ruth called regularly, her friendship a lifeline, always starting with the same question that mixed concern with curiosity. Have you heard from them? Not a word, I'd answer, trying to ignore the twinge in my heart that felt like a physical pain. I missed my son, the admission hard to make even to myself. Not the entitled adult he'd become, but the thoughtful boy he'd once been. The child who drew me pictures signed "Love Will" in crooked letters. The silence was both a relief and a wound that wouldn't heal. They're probably regrouping, Ruth said during our weekly lunch, her eyes sharp with insight. Joan's not the type to surrender easily. She's plotting something. I sighed, poking at my salad without appetite. Maybe they're finally growing up. Maybe they've realized they can manage without my checkbook. Even as I said it, I didn't quite believe it. Ruth gave me a look that said she doubted it, her skepticism clear without words. She was right to be skeptical, as events would soon prove. The doorbell rang at exactly midnight, the sound piercing the quiet house like an alarm. I'd been asleep for over an hour, and the harsh chime startled me from a deep dream. My heart racing as I sat bolt upright. For a moment, I lay disoriented in the darkness, wondering if I'd imagined it. Then it came again, more insistent this time, someone leaning on the bell. I pulled on my robe with shaking hands and made my way downstairs, heart pounding painfully against my ribs. Through the peephole, I saw a distorted figure standing on my porch, shoulders hunched, head bowed. It took me a moment to recognize Joan without her usual perfect posture and immaculate appearance, the transformation shocking. Against my better judgment, a mixture of curiosity and concern overriding my caution, I opened the door. Joan looked like a stranger, almost unrecognizable. Her typically styled hair hung limply around her face, unwashed and dull. Her mascara was smudged raccoon circles under her red-rimmed eyes from crying. She wore wrinkled clothes that looked like they'd been slept in for days. "Beth," she said, her voice hoarse and raw, "I need to talk to you." The desperation in her tone was unmistakable. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in, my heart still racing. Whatever this was, I didn't want the neighbors witnessing it, their curtains already twitching at the late-night visitor. Joan walked directly to my living room and sank onto the couch, her movements lacking their usual grace, almost stumbling. Up close, she looked even worse, the details alarming. Pale, almost grey complexion, exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. Defeated, the arrogance gone from her posture. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, not knowing what else to say, falling back on ingrained hospitality despite everything. She shook her head, a quick, jerky movement. "Will doesn't know I'm here." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I sat down across from her, pulling my robe tighter around me, suddenly chilled. "Why are you here, Joan?" I asked directly, too tired for games. "I need your help. Financial help." At least she was being direct this time, cutting through the pretense. "I've made my position clear." My voice was firmer than I felt. "Will's going to leave me." The words tumbled out in a rush. That stopped me cold, a shock running through me. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. The admission clearly painful for her. "He said he can't take it anymore," Joan continued, her voice cracking, hands twisting in her lap. "The stress, the debt, the lies. He's done, and I don't blame him." "What lies, Joan?" I leaned forward, genuinely concerned despite myself. She finally looked up, her expression a mix of shame and defiance that made her look younger, vulnerable. "I have a problem." The admission seemed pulled from her unwillingly. "What kind of problem?" Though I thought I already knew. "Shopping. Spending." She gestured vaguely, her hands shaking visibly. "The therapist calls it a compulsive behavior. Like an addiction." The words seemed to cost her. "Therapist?" That was new, a surprising development. "How long have you been seeing a therapist?" I asked, curiosity overriding resentment. "Since you cut us off?" Will insisted. She laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "He said I needed to figure out why I can't stop spending money we don't have. Why I feel empty unless I'm buying something new." I leaned back, processing this new information, pieces falling into place. "How bad is it, Joan?" My voice gentler now. "Bad. Really bad." Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled envelope, the paper worn as if she'd handled it repeatedly. "These are just the credit card statements from the last 6 months." I opened the envelope with dread, my fingers clumsy, and felt the blood drain from my face as I scanned the documents. 6 credit cards, all maxed out. The total was staggering, making my head spin, over $87,000 in debt on items I couldn't begin to imagine. "Will doesn't know the full amount," Joan said quietly, her voice small. "I've been hiding statements, intercepting mail, telling him things are under control. But they're not." She shook her head, a tear sliding down her cheek. I couldn't stop. Every time I felt stressed or anxious or not good enough, buying something new made me feel better. Just for a little while, like a drug. And then I felt worse, so I bought something else. Her confession made her seem suddenly human in a way she never had before. Joan wiped at her eyes, smearing what remained of her makeup. "It's been like this since I was a teenager. My parents always bailed me out, never making me face consequences. Then I met Will, and you were always there with another check, another transfer. The truth of her words hit home. We enabled you, I said softly, recognizing my own role in this disaster. Joan nodded, relief crossing her face at being understood. When you stopped the money, everything fell apart. I couldn't hide it anymore. The collection calls started coming to the house. A credit card company froze one of our accounts. Will started asking questions I couldn't answer. Her voice broke on the last word. I looked at the woman sitting across from me, really looked at her. Not the polished, confident Joan who had called me a shrew, but someone broken and desperate, stripped of her defenses. For the first time, I felt something close to sympathy for her, seeing beyond the facade to the wounded person beneath. Why come to me? I asked, genuinely curious. After everything that's happened, the things you said? Because I have nowhere else to go, Joan said simply, her honesty disarming. My parents are retired in Florida. They don't have this kind of money. My friends. She trailed off, looking embarrassed. They're not really friends. They like my lifestyle, the shopping trips, the lunches, the image I project. They won't help now that I can't keep up appearances. And what do you expect me to do? I asked, though not unkindly. I don't know, she admitted, vulnerability in her eyes I'd never seen before. Pay off the debt? Save my marriage? Tell me how to fix this mess I've made. Her desperation was palpable. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my darkened street, my reflection ghostly in the glass. It would be so easy to write a check, to smooth over the problems as I'd done for years, to be the rescuer again. But would that actually help Joan? Would it help Will? Or would it just reset the cycle of dependency that had brought us to this point? If I paid off these debts, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, what would change? Would you stop the compulsive spending? Would Will suddenly start standing up for himself? Would either of you learn anything from this? The questions hung in the air, important beyond the immediate crisis. Joan didn't answer, which was answer enough, her silence more honest than words could be. You called me a shrew because I suggested you be more responsible with money. I continued, turning to face her. You resented my interference while happily taking my support. You turned my son against me when I finally said enough. These aren't small things, Joan. They can't be erased with an apology. I know, Joan whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. I'm sorry. I really am. Are you? Or are you just sorry that the consequences have finally caught up with you? The question wasn't meant to be cruel, just honest. Her silence spoke volumes, more eloquent than any words. I turned back to face her, my decision made. I won't give you money, Joan. Her face crumpled, hope dying in her eyes. Then Will is going to leave me. I'll lose everything. Maybe he should, I said, not unkindly, compassion tempering my words. Maybe you both need to face reality without a safety net. Maybe that's the only way real change happens. You hate me that much? Joan asked, a flash of her old fire returning briefly. I don't hate you at all, I replied honestly, surprising myself with the truth of it. But I've learned something important these last few weeks. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop rescuing someone from their own choices. Joan stared at me, tears streaming down her face, makeup completely gone now. For a moment, I saw something like understanding in her eyes, a glimmer of recognition. Then the moment passed, and she stood up, gathering her purse with trembling hands. You'll regret this, she said, but the threat sounded hollow, even to her own ears, lacking the conviction of her earlier attacks. When Will and I are divorced, when your grandchildren are growing up in a broken home, you'll remember this night and wish you'd helped. I opened the front door for her, not rising to the bait. What I'll remember, Joan, is that I finally stopped being an enabler and started being a mother. That's what real love looks like sometimes. She stepped onto the porch, then turned back one last time, vulnerability breaking through again. I really am sorry for what I called you, for how I treated you. I just don't know how to live any other way. The admission seemed torn from her. You can learn, I said, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. But not if everyone keeps making it easy for you not to. I watched as she walked to her car. Not the red BMW I'd noticed at the mall, but an older sedan I didn't recognize. Clearly a downgrade. As her tail lights disappeared down the street, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief washing over me. For the first time, I'd seen the real Joan. Not the confident, polished woman who had swept my son off his feet, but the broken person beneath the facade. And in her brokenness, I recognized a truth I'd been avoiding. In my attempts to help, I'd been part of the problem all along, the realization both painful and liberating. The morning of my Alaskan cruise departure dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window like a promise. I stood in my bedroom, surrounded by carefully packed suitcases, and took a deep breath that filled my lungs completely. 2 months had passed since Joan's midnight visit. 2 months of silence from both her and Will. 2 months of rebuilding my life without the weight of their expectations, draining my energy and my bank account, each day a little lighter than the last. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you to the port?" Ruth asked over the phone, her concern making me smile. "It's no trouble at all. The car service is already booked," I replied, checking my watch nervously. "Besides, you'd just cry and make me feel guilty for leaving you behind for 2 weeks." The teasing felt good, normal. Ruth laughed, the sound warming my heart. "You know me too well, damn you." Her voice softened, turning serious. "Have you heard anything?" The question she always asked. She didn't need to specify from whom, the unspoken understanding between old friends. Not a word. I tried to hide the hint of sadness that still lingered. "Their loss," Ruth said firmly, her loyalty unwavering. "You're going to have an amazing time. Send me pictures of those glaciers." After we hung up, I did one final sweep of the house, nervous energy making me double-check everything. Plants watered, each leaf inspected. Mail on hold, confirmation printout on the counter. Lights on timers, tested multiple times. Everything perfect, no detail overlooked. As I wheeled my suitcase to the front door, my heart light with anticipation. The doorbell rang, the sound making me jump, probably the driver, early. I opened the door with a welcoming smile that froze on my face, shock making me step back. Will stood on my porch, hands in his pockets. Looking older than his 34 years, lines on his face I hadn't noticed before. "Mom," he said quietly, uncertainty in his voice. "Will?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, tight with surprise. "I wasn't expecting you." My heart pounded painfully. He glanced at my luggage, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're going somewhere?" A touch of panic in his voice. "Alaska." "A cruise." "I leave this morning." The dream I'd deferred for years finally happening. He nodded, processing this information, disappointment flashing across his face. "Can I come in? Just for a minute?" "I know your timing is tight." I hesitated, torn between curiosity and self-protection, then stepped aside. Will entered cautiously, as if he wasn't sure of his welcome in the home where he'd grown up, where his height was still marked on the kitchen door frame. "I would have called first," he said, nervousness making him shift his weight. "But I was afraid you wouldn't want to see me." The admission clearly cost him. "I would have answered," I said simply, truth in the words, despite everything. He looked around the living room, his gaze lingering on family photos I'd recently rearranged, his observant eyes missing nothing. More of Robert and me in the early years, fewer of Will and Joan, the change deliberate but subtle. "You've made some changes," he observed, something like understanding in his voice. "Yes," I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "I have." The words carried more weight than their simplicity suggested. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, years of unsaid things hanging in the air. Finally, Will took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders like he used to do before diving into the deep end of the pool. "Joan and I separated," he said, "a month ago." The words tumbled out quickly, as if he'd rehearsed them. Despite Joan's midnight warnings, the news still shocked me, making my breath catch. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, mother's instinct kicking in despite everything. Will shook his head, a rueful smile crossing his face. "Don't be. It was a long time coming. I just couldn't see it, or didn't want to see it." "What happened?" I asked, genuine concern replacing caution. He sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted, the weight of his burdens visible in every line of his body. "The debt happened. The lies happened. I found out she'd been hiding credit card statements for years. We're over $100,000 in debt." His voice broke on the number. I kept my face neutral, though the figure was even higher than what Joan had shown me, the deception deeper than I'd imagined. "That's a lot of money." The understatement felt inadequate. "It's worse than that," Will continued, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "She took out a second mortgage on the apartment without telling me. Used my signature, forged it right on the paper." He laughed bitterly, the sound holding no humor. "The bank's investigating her for fraud." I could have pressed charges, but I didn't. I couldn't do that to her despite everything. I sat down across from him, processing this new information. The depth of deception shocking even after everything that had happened. Is that why you're here? Do you need a lawyer? Money for legal fees? The old instinct to rescue him still strong. Will looked stricken, genuine hurt crossing his face. No, Mom. I'm not here for money. I'm here to apologize. Apologize for everything. He leaned forward, eyes intense with emotion. For letting Joan treat you the way she did. For expecting you to finance our lifestyle. For not being the son you raised me to be. His voice broke on the last words. I didn't speak, afraid that if I did, this moment would shatter like glass. The fragile connection between us breaking. When you cut us off, I was angry. Will continued, the confession clearly difficult for him. I thought you were being petty, punishing us for one bad day. I didn't see how entitled I'd become, how used to taking and taking without giving anything back. How I'd stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a resource to be tapped. What changed? I asked quietly, hope and caution warring in my heart. Everything. Will ran a hand through his hair again, emotion making him restless. We had to move out of the apartment. Couldn't afford it anymore. I took a second job waiting tables at night. Started looking at our actual finances for the first time in years. He shook his head, self-disgust clear in his expression. I was shocked by what I saw. The waste, the irresponsibility. My irresponsibility. It was like waking up from a dream to find I'd turned into someone I didn't recognize or like. It wasn't all your fault, I said softly, maternal instinct to protect him still strong. Enough of it was. Will met my gaze directly, a maturity in his eyes I hadn't seen before. You were right, Mom, about all of it. I let myself become dependent. I let Joan disrespect you because it was easier than standing up to her. I chose the path of least resistance, and it cost me my relationship with you. His voice broke on the last words. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back, not wanting to break this moment of honesty. It's not too late to fix that. The words came from my heart. That's why I'm here. Will reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, somewhat crumpled. This isn't much, but it's a start. I opened it with trembling fingers to find a check for $200, the amount surprising me. It's not even a fraction of what I owe you, Will said quickly, embarrassment coloring his voice. But I'm going to pay you back, Mom. All of it. It might take years, but I'm going to make this right. The determination in his voice was new, adult. I looked at the check, then at my son. Really looked at him, seeing past. My hurt and disappointment to the man before me. Gone was the entitled young man who expected the world to pave his way. In his place sat someone humbled, someone growing, someone finding his way back to himself. Keep it, I said, holding the check out to him, the gesture coming naturally. Use it to get back on your feet. Mom, no, I want to. His protest was immediate. I know you do, and that means more to me than the money ever could. I placed the check on the coffee table between us. A bridge rather than a barrier. This isn't about money, Will. It never was. It was about respect, about boundaries, about you becoming the man I raised you to be. Will's eyes filled with tears, emotion finally breaking through completely. I've missed you, he said, his voice breaking. So much. Every day. I've missed you too, I admitted, the truth feeling like release. Not the you who expected me to fund your lifestyle. The real you, the son I've always loved. He nodded, understanding passing between us. The real me got lost somewhere along the way. I'm trying to find him again. It's hard, but I'm trying every day. My phone buzzed. The car service waiting outside, the sound bringing me back to the present moment. I have to go, I said reluctantly, torn between staying and keeping my plans. My cruise. Will stood up quickly, genuinely concerned. Of course. I didn't mean to keep you. He hesitated, uncertainty in his face. When you get back, maybe we could have dinner. Just the two of us. I'd like to hear about your trip. I'd like that, I said, surprised by how much I meant it, warmth spreading through me. He helped me with my luggage, carrying it to the waiting car, just like he used to do when he was younger. The familiar action bringing back memories of airport drop-offs and college move-in days. As the driver stowed my bags in the trunk, Will turned to me. Something else clearly on his mind. I have one more thing to tell you, he said, determination in his face. I enrolled in financial counseling, and I'm seeing a therapist. I don't want to repeat the same patterns again. I want to understand how I got here. Pride washed over me, deep and genuine. Not the possessive pride I'd once felt in his accomplishments, but a deeper, purer pride in his growth, in his willingness to face difficult truths. That takes courage, I said, meaning every word. I learned it from you. His simple words brought tears to my eyes. He leaned down and kissed my cheek, the gesture sweet and familiar. Have an amazing trip, Mom. Take lots of pictures. You deserve this. I will, I promised, my heart full. As the car pulled away, I watched Will standing in my driveway, waving until we turned the corner. I didn't know what the future held for us, whether we could rebuild the relationship that had been so damaged. But for the first time in years, I felt hope blossoming in my chest, a tentative but growing belief that something better might lie ahead. That night, as the cruise ship pulled away from the harbor, I stood on the deck and watched the city lights recede into the distance, each one growing smaller until they were just pinpricks against the darkening sky. The salty air filled my lungs with each deep breath, and a sense of profound peace settled over me, seeping into my bones. I'd spent so many years being everyone else's support system that I'd forgotten how to exist for myself. I'd given and given until I was hollow inside, thinking that was what love meant, what being a good mother required. But real love had boundaries. Real love expected respect. Real love didn't drain you dry until there was nothing left but resentment and exhaustion. 6 months ago, being called a shrew at my own Mother's Day table had felt like the ultimate betrayal, the pain so acute I could barely breathe through it. Now I recognized it as the moment that set me free. The moment I stopped accepting crumbs and started demanding the feast I deserved, the catalyst that forced me to value myself when no one else would. The ship's horns sounded long and low, the vibration rumbling through my chest as we moved into open water. Above me, stars emerged in the darkening sky, countless pinpricks of light appearing one by one. Somewhere ahead lay glaciers and fjords, wildlife and adventure. New friends and experiences I'd denied myself for too long, dreams deferred now finally within reach. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal solid under my hands, feeling lighter than I had in years. The money I'd put aside, the money I'd finally stopped giving away, was now funding the dreams I'd postponed. The energy I'd spent managing Will and Joan's crises was now my own again. A resource to be spent on my own joy rather than others' problems. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me from my reverie. A text from Ruth, bon voyage. Remember, you don't owe anyone your joy. Not even your children. I smiled, typing back with fingers that no longer trembled. Lesson learned. Finally. As the shoreline disappeared completely, swallowed by the horizon, I made myself a silent promise. The words forming clearly in my mind. I would never again mistake sacrifice for love or boundaries for cruelty. I would never again allow anyone to make me feel guilty for valuing myself. And if that made me a shrew in someone else's story, so be it. In my own story, the one that truly mattered, I was finally, gloriously free.